Hello, how are you today? I'm having a busy one. If you haven't seen, I am preparing for a live masterclass happening on Monday. So I've got 2 sessions on Monday, one at midday, one at 8 p.m. They are how to overcome your dreaded monthly mood swings. 3 strategies for a calm and peaceful cycle. So if you haven't signed up, you can sign up in the link below. I highly recommend joining. I'm going to be talking about all the different foods that can exacerbate your anxiety, exacerbate your symptoms. I'm going to be talking about ways to elevate serotonin. I'm going to be going into a little bit of technical about the cycle, what should be happening during your menstrual cycle and what is actually happening. So it's going to be a wonderful masterclass. This week has been absolutely hectic. So if you haven't signed up, sign up. That's on Monday, 12 p.m. and 8 p.m. and there will be a replay available. But for those that join live, there will be a bit of a bonus and also a Q&A at the end with me. So just wanted to let you know that quickly. Today I want to talk a little bit about stress and how it affects your cycle, how it affects your hormones, particularly your mood swings, and just a couple of key things that can happen when cortisol and adrenaline rise. So generally stress, when we get stressed, stress is a good thing. So we don't want to live a life with no stress. Stress actually helps to regulate a lot of functions in our body, and if we never get stressed and we're completely just chilled out the whole time, that can actually have opposite effects. So our body needs to kind of go through these stressors, but these stressors are more acute stresses, just seeing something suddenly that you think might be dangerous, and then your fight or flight is activated. And the whole point then is that your nervous system, your ability to bring yourself down from that fight or flight is there. This is where things are starting to go a little bit haywire, because what I'm finding and what is actually happening are women, men, everybody are finding it difficult to regulate themselves. So instead of this nice peak, when you're driving along in the car, you suddenly almost think you had an accident and you get that like sickness feeling in your stomach, the adrenaline rises, you feel the heart, but then it should go down. Now, some people feel like that all the time, and some people have got what's called negativity bias as well. Negativity bias is where you're constantly in fight or flight, you've constantly got high adrenaline, you've constantly got high cortisol, so you perceive more dangers. You perceive more dangers around you. So really, instead of the immediate dangers, you start to see more things, you start to anticipate, you're always on fight or flight, and this kind of causes a vicious cycle. So what we ideally want is we want to go through an acute stress, but we want to be able to bring our bodies down from that acute stress. So high cortisol, high adrenaline, re-regulate. High cortisol, high adrenaline, re-regulate. That's the ideal situation. It's not to go 24/7 for the rest of our lives with no stress. That's not good for us. Cortisol helps to function, helps the immune system modulation. So too high, too low, you can get immune problems. It also helps to regulate inflammation. So this is why a lot of people with high cortisol, really high adrenaline, chronic stress, go through a lot of pain. And this is one of the issues with women in their cycle as well, when their sort of pain flares up. Cortisol helps to regulate the thyroid as well. The pancreas, also the stomach, also brain, memory retention, gluconeogenesis. Gluconeogenesis is making glucose from things like protein. So too much cortisol can cause too much gluconeogenesis. Too much gluconeogenesis causes too much glucose in the body, and then we get that fat storage, the fat storage on our belly, and also those little fat pockets on the insides of the thigh sometimes as well. They can grow because of stress. So stress has a huge implication on weight. And this is why I'm finding a lot of people at the moment are having issues with stubborn weight because of the stress, everything that's going on in the world today. Even though you might not be thinking you're stressed, there's this kind of like undercurrent of stress. And so I'm actually finding clients are exercising and eating well, but what they're finding is they're putting on a little bit of weight during this time. And so look at your adrenals, look at your cortisol if you're putting on unexplained weight. It's one of the biggest things that can be causing that. Another thing is breakdown. Cortisol can cause the breakdown of muscle. So you get kind of this this ratio of more fat mass, less muscle mass, where really you want the opposite. We want to have more muscle mass, and we do want to have some fat mass. We don't want to have no fat mass. We need fat mass for our hormones. As women, we need to make a little bit of storage for either our fertile years, or we need a little bit of storage post-menopause. We want some fat because the fat's got some growth hormone in, the fat's got estrogen, the fat's got progesterone. So we do want that, but obviously we want the muscle to be at kind of a higher level, if that makes sense. So the problem with these modern days, there's tons of things that put our body into stress response. So back in the old days, it used to be some animal was going to eat us. And so we'd have to either escape the animal or kill the animal or get eaten, or whatever would happen, and then we'd kind of come down from that stress. But now there's a ton of things in our life that are causing stress. Food intolerances for one. When we eat foods that cause issues with our gut, that can raise our cortisol, and it kind of causes this systemic cortisol issue, this systemic adrenaline issue. So that's food intolerances. Leaky gut, that the same thing as food intolerances. Injury, so injury and illness, so any illness like glandular fever, herpes, viral illness, colds and flus, all that kind of thing, plus a stress to our body, so maybe breaking something, twisting something, injuring something, so all of those can cause that cortisol inflammation. Toxins as well, so heavy metals, PBAs, plastics, chemicals in perfumes, chemicals in beauty products, blood sugar fluctuations, and I'm going to touch on this in a minute when it comes to our hormones. So when cortisol rises, that initiates us to get glucagon from storage, glycogen, and we get that from storage, and that's turned into glucose for energy. So the more higher the cortisol and the more higher the adrenaline, the more we'll get that from storage. This is one of the telltale signs of that is when you wake at about 3 a.m. in the morning, and you wake with a start, and then you kind of awoke like this. And what that can be is your body getting the blood glucose dropping and the cortisol initiating, then it's getting more glucose from storage. Does that make sense? So all these functions, we've got the digestive, we've got the immune, we've got the metabolic processes, and we've also got the fertility processes. All of these are causing issues with the body and causing issues with your hormones. Oh, it's getting hot in here. Okay. Oh, thank you, Sue. Yes, it is super interesting. So let's talk about progesterone. So one of the things with progesterone is when our cortisol is high, that lowers progesterone. So progesterone lowers down and it funnels into cortisol. So the more stress we get, the more that the cortisol will rise. And so the cortisol will keep rising and progesterone will lower. Now this will cause many symptoms. This can cause anxiety, this can cause weight gain, this can cause pain. The lower the progesterone is, the more your pain perception. So anything like fibromyalgia, anything like chronic pain, arthritis, what you'll find is as the progesterone decreases, you'll get more influence of that pain. And so sometimes in your cycle you won't feel that pain, and other times in that cycle you'll have a lot of pain. So that's what can happen with the cortisol. It kind of funnels the progesterone. They're in the same kind of hormone cascade. So the progesterone will be funneled down. So your progesterone will start to lower. Another thing that can occur, and this happens to a lot of women, this can occur, and this is fertility issues. So as the progesterone comes down and the cortisol rises, this causes an issue with ovulation, and this can inhibit ovulation. And then once ovulation is inhibited, you get lower and lower progesterone, and then the cycle continues. Now, I had an interesting question the other day about ovulation. A client asked me, well, I still have my period, so I must be ovulating. But the issue is, you still get your periods because of the follicular phase and because you're getting that uterine lining. Even though you get your period, it doesn't mean 100% you're ovulating. So you do need to check into that. Check into when you think your ovulation is occurring. Because if you're not ovulating, you're not producing progesterone, and then that causes that vicious cycle of then in terms of the fertility issues. And we find that a lot of women going through stress are having these fertility issues and having to go to IVF. Another thing that can happen with low progesterone is it interferes with aldosterone. And aldosterone sort of regulates your fluid in your body. It regulates your sodium and it regulates your potassium as well as other electrolytes. So what can happen is, as aldosterone rises, as you've got that higher cortisol, you get more sodium retention. And then what happens is you get magnesium and you get potassium excreted. Now, what this does to your moods in your cycle is it can cause that kind of agitation. You might get heart palpitations, you might get dehydration, you might get fluid retention. So you might get fluid on your hands, you might get fluid on your face. All of those kind of things that happen when you're holding on to sodium. So really, that low progesterone can cause an issue with the fluid balance. And one of the signs of cortisol being high and progesterone being low is that thirst, that satiating thirst. You know, when you're so thirsty and you can't quench your thirst. So you're drinking and you're drinking and you're drinking, but really it's an electrolyte issue. And the electrolytes, once you get them balanced, that can help with that thirst. So using vegetable sticks, using electrolytes to help balance that out can be really effective. But ultimately you want to deal with kind of the stress as well. And when I'm talking about electrolytes, I'm talking about calcium, I'm talking about potassium, sodium and magnesium. So just getting those balanced and making sure you're having fluid, not just in water form, but you're also having those electrolytes there. So Yvette, yes. So one of the interesting things, and in terms of progesterone and in terms of the menstrual cycle, this is what's interesting. That luteal phase after ovulation and before your next menstrual cycle, that phase is very similar to menopause. So that phase and the way your hormones are presenting is very similar to what can be going on in menopause. So if you're not ovulating and your progesterone is really low, that's similar to what once you've gone through menopause and you're not ovulating, that progesterone can be dropping out, particularly if you're going through stress. And one of the things about menopause, one of the biggest factors when it comes to menopause is stress. So it's not just focusing on the hormones, the biggest thing is stress. And if you start to regulate your stress response, you'll start to support your progesterone. So after menopause, we can still make hormones. We store hormones and we make hormones in our fatty tissue. We make progesterone in our adrenals. So if you're highly stressed, your adrenals is going to make cortisol, and it's not going to prioritize progesterone. So this is why getting stress under control is really important. And I did see a question a moment ago about how do you know if you ovulate? And ovulation, you need to be looking out for the signs and you need to be tracking your cycle. So generally ovulation is around day 14 of your cycle. You ovulate, you should be maybe you're getting that egg white discharge, maybe you're getting a peak in temperature, maybe you're getting a little bit of pain around that time. And then what should happen once you ovulate is you get into that kind of calming phase of the elevated progesterone. I'm going to be talking about this in the masterclass because I want to take you through your cycle and exactly what stages to look out for and what signs and symptoms to look out for. But definitely, so fluid under the eyebrows. So fluid under the eyebrows, if we've got the fluid here. So normally fluid, so if you get fluid here, this isn't fluid, this is just little fatty pockets that we get as we get older. If we get fluid here, that's normally thyroid related and can be low progesterone. Fluid here is more that accumulation of the lymphatics and kidneys and liver, and it's more about detoxing. So you want to make sure you're getting enough electrolytes, you want to make sure you're keeping hydrated, and then looking after your lymphatic system. So looking after your liver, dandelion leaf tea, dry skin brushing, castor oil packs, all of that kind of thing. Sometimes it can be thyroid, but thyroid and hormones are normally here and sort of like around this eye area, sort of pops out a little bit more. Does that make sense? Yeah, under the eyebrows is more that sort of under the eyebrow here, do gua sha. So do gua sha on the face to get that out to the, so we've got lymph nodes here, and just do some nice gua sha-ing in your face to get the lymph moving on your skin. That would be the best thing for you to do there. That would get all that fluid out nicely. Gua sha is a fantastic on the face. So we're talking about aldosterone. Now, I just want to touch on briefly about what cortisol does to your insulin. Cortisol actually, over time, so you initiate cortisol, that stress response, it causes more glucose in the body, and then this elevates your insulin over time. And what this can cause is insulin resistance. Now, this is really important for women that suffer from polycystic ovarian syndrome and women with PMDD, premenstrual dysphoric disorder. That is that severe depression, maybe suicidal thoughts, maybe really severe mood swings, anxiety. That it's the more of severity in the luteal phase. And if you suffer from that, or polycystic ovarian syndrome, or you're a woman that gets lots of kind of hair here, or you get really bad acne, what can happen with stress is it causes more insulin in the body. What insulin does is it upregulates this pathway called 5-alpha reductase. So what this causes is it causes, sometimes in women it can cause more testosterone, but it can also cause more progesterone metabolites. So what happens in your luteal phase, after you ovulate, you produce progesterone, but it turns too quickly into a metabolite. So instead of getting that nice calming progesterone, you get too many of the metabolites, and this happens too quickly. And so this is why women with polycystic ovarian syndrome or PMDD in particular, they get that sudden day, that sudden crash where they're either extremely depressed, extremely anxious, having dark thoughts. Suicidal thoughts is a big one as well with these women. You know, anxious about everything, feeling paranoid. It's real severe symptoms, and that can happen because of this high insulin. And so getting your stress under control and reducing that insulin can have a real knock-on effect of these mood swings, particularly in the luteal phase. Other things that can be exacerbated in the luteal phase of your cycle, if you've got this high cortisol and if you've got an issue with adrenaline, inflammation, so I mentioned pain, high blood pressure rise. You might find you actually gain weight after the luteal phase. You might also find you have constipation, diarrhea. Heartburn is a big one. You might find you get this exacerbation of heartburn, reflux, high blood sugar readings. So if you take your blood sugar, you might find that you get more high blood sugar readings. Hair loss as well can happen as well with this. That can be something that can happen. Also, blurred vision is a biggie. Now, blurred vision can happen due to blood pressure issues, but also thyroid issues. So the thyroid, due to stress and cortisol, can actually lower during the luteal phase. So you can see how this chronic stress, the impact it has on all of your hormones generally, and then also how it can exacerbate this luteal phase. So if you're finding you really struggle in the luteal phase, you really struggle after ovulation, you really struggle before your period with mood swings and physical symptoms, you might need to have a look at the stress in terms of, okay, regulating that and focusing on that first before you focus solely on the hormones, or even before you do anything like hormone replacement, HRT, if you're going through menopause, because sometimes that can exacerbate symptoms as well if you've got extremely high cortisol and extremely high adrenaline. So hyperinsulinemia is the biggest thing here that we're talking about, because that can cause a lot of dysregulation with the hormones, a lot of sugar cravings, depression, anxiety, and extreme mood swings. In some people, high insulin can cause keratosis pilaris. High insulin can also cause hair loss, and acne as well. So there's a lot of different symptoms that it can cause. Then we've got, it can also suppress the thyroid. So that can lead to that brain fog, water retention, extreme fatigue, and extreme depression as well. So low thyroid, that the symptoms really do mimic that those depressive symptoms. So if you have low thyroid, just knowing that sometimes it's more to do with the cortisol, insulin, rather than the thyroid. And then also, if you're a lady that doesn't ovulate, you really need to just check in and see what your insulin levels are, see what your cortisol levels are doing as well. So a lot of this in terms of supporting yourself is diet and lifestyle. You know, just making sure, particularly when you go, if you have these severe symptoms, sugar is the biggest thing you need to cut out. And in that luteal phase, often sugar is a thing we go to. Often sugar is a thing we crave because of the high insulin and fluctuating glucose. But if you do stop the sugar, you will notice a huge difference. You will notice a huge difference with those symptoms. It will support your serotonin. It will kind of replete your body. Your body's minerals will start to come up as well. One of my favorite herbs to help with serotonin and GABA during this time in the cycle, and this can also be good for postmenopause, can be Magnolia. Magnolia is a wonderful herb that supports GABA and serotonin, and it can really just take the edge off those symptoms, particularly during that time in your cycle or postmenopause, like I mentioned. Raising oxytocin is a biggie, so socializing, massage, sex, all of those things to help raise oxytocin. It's really important that you make sure the oxytocin levels are getting up there and you're feeling good about it. Yin exercise. So if you go through severe symptoms, if you're going through a lot of issues during the luteal phase and the moods are just all over the place, you need to be focusing more on yin activities. So not doing intense exercise, not doing HIIT training. And I think one thing I am noticing is with fasting, if you do have extreme anxiety, extreme depression in the luteal phase, fasting maybe isn't the best thing for you, because fasting can kind of raise that cortisol, raise that adrenaline. So you might need to time when you do certain diets. What you want to do in the luteal phase is make sure you're having, 3 regular meals. Make sure you're having really well balanced meals, fat, protein, some starchy carbs, lots of vegetables, and you're not relying on sugar, you're not relying on alcohol. And you're giving the body the energy it needs in terms of not fasting for too long. I mean, fasting overnight's okay, and then maybe having breakfast a little bit later is fine, but just not too long. But you'll be able to gauge it. And then just not taking on too many stressful projects during that time, because you're more sensitive to stress, you're more sensitive to things, and you might feel that agitation, you might feel that kind of like electricity in the body. And then one thing that I do love is just glutamine, particularly if you have anxiety coupled with a lot of food cravings and a lot of sugar dysregulation. Glutamine can work quite nicely as well. And then get your minerals up, magnesium, Epsom salt baths, putting magnesium on the body, in terms of magnesium sprays. Those can really help and support your adrenals and support to bring cortisol down. If you know you have really high cortisol, if you suspect very high cortisol, you want to stay away from things that are too stimulating. So, the ginsengs can sometimes be too stimulating. Rhodiola's really building. It's really good if you're in a low cortisol state. But when you've got high cortisol, sometimes rhodiola can be a little bit too much. Withania is good at suppressing cortisol. If you've got really low cortisol, maybe not withania, but it's good in those stressful states. So again, good in the luteal phase. And vitamin C is wonderful as well. Doing high dose vitamin C helps to regulate your cortisol levels. So there's a lot there you can be doing, but definitely look out for that, because if you're not targeting your cortisol, you're not targeting your adrenaline, this can cause issues. And in the luteal phase, and it can exacerbate PMDD, polycystic ovarian syndrome, endometriosis, and PMS as well. So I hope you found that useful. There was kind of a lot there I wanted to get through. So I hope that was helpful. So if you want some more concise information, just head on over and join up to my masterclass. So the masterclass is going to be via Zoom on Monday. There's a class at 12 p.m. and a class at 8 p.m. So you do need to sign up to join. Once you sign up, you get the link for the Zoom link. That will be sent through to you. So highly recommend you come and join me live on Monday. So I hope that was helpful. Thank you, Sue. if you have any questions, please pop them below. I know I went through a lot just then, so have a fantastic day and I'll talk to you all soon. Bye.